All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to unpack a huge puzzle at the heart of economics. It's a game that every single country has to play, whether they want to or not. And the rules? Well, they're a lot stricter than you might think. I mean, it seems like it should be easy, right? If the economy's in a slump, just hit the gas, print some more cash, give everyone a tax cut. Problem solved. But yeah, it's just not that simple. Because the second you connect your economy to the rest of the world for trade, for investment, you're suddenly playing on a much, much bigger field. Every move you make creates ripples that travel across the globe. And guess what? The world's waves come crashing right back at you. Yeah, it really all boils down to one single decision, a choice that sets the rules for everything else that follows, and it determines which tools in your economic toolkit are going to work and which ones will be totally useless.
So to really understand that choice, first we need to get a good look at the game board itself.
Okay, I know what you're thinking, an equation, but stick with me here, it's actually a really simple idea. All this is saying is that everything a country produces, that's its GDP, or Y, it has to go somewhere, right? It's either consumed by people like you and me, that's C, invested by companies, I, spent by the government, G, or sold to other countries, which we call net exports. It's just a basic rule, like balancing your checkbook. This is the board for the entire game. And this brings us right back to that one single fundamental choice. How are you going to manage your currency in this big global game? Think of your economy as a giant ship. You basically have two options. Option one, you can drop an anchor. This is a fixed exchange rate, where you tie your currency's value to something stable, like the US dollar. This gives you predictability, which is awesome for trade. Option two, you can choose a floating rate. You just let your currency's value ride the waves of global supply and demand. This gives you flexibility, autonomy. So anchor or float, stability or autonomy. Here's the catch. You can't have both. So let's explore that first option. What actually happens when you decide to drop the anchor and fix your exchange rate? Okay, imagine your central bank wants to give the economy a little boost, so it lowers interest rates to get people borrowing and spending. But we're in a global world, and money is always chasing the best return. So investors see your lower rates and they pull their capital out to go find higher rates elsewhere. All that money leaving weakens your currency. And because you promised to keep that rate fixed, your central bank has to step in. It starts buying up your own currency to prop up the price, and that shrinks the money supply, which pushes interest rates right back up to where they started.
And boom! The initial move is completely canceled out. By choosing the stability of that anchor, you've basically given up your power to use monetary policy. The anchor is just holding the ship too tight for the rudder to have any effect.
Okay, so monetary policy is a no-go. What if the government tries something else? Let's say it uses fiscal policy, like spending a bunch of money on new roads and bridges. This spending boosts the economy, which pushes interest rates up. Now, the exact opposite happens. Foreign investors see those juicy, high returns, and they rush their capital into your country. This makes your currency stronger. So, to defend your fixed rate, the central bank has to sell your currency, which actually expands the money supply. So get this. The central bank's actions to defend the currency actually end up reinforcing the government's stimulus. The fiscal policy doesn't just work, it gets supercharged. When you're tied to that anchor, fiscal policy becomes your main engine. All right, that was life with an anchor. Now, let's pull that anchor up, cut the ship loose, and see what it's like to ride the waves with a floating exchange rate. So let's run that same experiment again. The central bank lowers interest rates. And just like before, capital starts to flow out. But here is the massive difference. There's no anchor. The central bank just does nothing. It lets the currency's value fall. And a cheaper currency is actually great news for your economy because it makes your exports way cheaper for other countries to buy. So your net exports get this huge boost. So what's the bottom line here? The initial stimulus from lower rates is now amplified by a surge in exports. By choosing to float, you've taken back control of your monetary policy. The rudder works again, and man, it is incredibly powerful. But now for the twist. What happens to fiscal policy in this world? The government spends more, driving up interest rates. Capital flows in, seeking those high returns. But with no anchor, the currency just gets stronger and stronger. And a super strong currency, that's terrible for your exports. Your net exports just fall off a cliff. And here's the punchline. That big drop in net exports completely cancels out the initial boost from government spending.
It's a phenomenon called crowding out via the external sector. In a floating rate system, fiscal policy loses almost all of its punch. It's like you're hitting the gas and the brakes at the exact same time. The two worlds really are perfect mirror images of each other.
Now, this choice between anchoring and floating sounds all very neat and tidy in theory, right? But the real world is messy, and the tides of global finance, they can be incredibly dangerous. This quote right here, this captures the #1 nightmare for any economic policymaker: a sudden stop. It's when all that foreign money that's been flowing into your country suddenly slams on the brakes, reverses course, and flees all at once. And that can trigger a devastating currency crisis, a banking collapse, a deep recession. So, how do countries protect themselves from these terrifyingly volatile tides? Well, they're not helpless. They've got a toolbox of measures to manage these capital flows. The goal isn't to build a wall and stop all investment. It's about managing the type of money coming in and how fast it comes. They can tax short-term speculative hot money like Brazil did. They can tell their banks, hey, you can't borrow too much in foreign currencies. Think of it less like building a dam and more like building seawalls to handle the most dangerous currents. And if you want to see a real-world catastrophe in action, just look at the 1980s. Back in the 70s, countries all over Latin America took on huge amounts of foreign debt. Then, in the US, the central bank jacked up its own interest rates to fight inflation. All of a sudden, the debt payments for countries like Brazil and Mexico just skyrocketed. It became unsustainable. In 1982, Mexico defaulted, and that triggered a massive, sudden stop. International credit to the entire region just froze solid overnight, kicking off what's known as the lost decade. It's a brutal reminder of how one country's policy can create a tidal wave that swamps everyone else. So after all this, after seeing all these powerful forces and these really tough choices, you kind of have to ask yourself, right? Is there one right answer, a perfect system that just works for everyone? And the answer really is a hard no. What we've been walking through is a classic idea in international economics called the impossible trinity, or sometimes the trilemma. The idea is that every country wants three things: a stable, fixed exchange rate, free movement of capital in and out of the country, and an independent monetary policy to manage its own economy. The trilemma says you can only ever have two out of those three. You have to choose. Do you want stability, which makes your fiscal policy powerful but gives up your monetary independence? Or do you want autonomy, which makes monetary policy a super tool but basically neuters your fiscal policy? You simply cannot have it all. And navigating that fundamental trade-off, well, that's the endless, fascinating, and incredibly high-stakes game of economics in our connected world.